Welcome back. I'm Harlan, your backyard grill sergeant, here to take your grilling to the next level. Today, I'm going to show you how to smoke a brisket. Okay, once you get it out of the package, you really don't want to take it over to the sink and wash it. You just want to take a paper towel like this, and if it's really moist like this one, you just tamp it down with a paper towel and get the excess moisture off it. Over here, this part of the brisket is a lot thinner, and over here it's a lot thicker. Over here on this side, there's two muscles. There's this muscle and an additional one, and then there's this big ridge of fat right here. Okay, so we're going to talk about that here in a couple minutes. So let's first flip it over. You see here, if the fat cap is less than a half an inch or about a quarter inch thick, I like to leave it alone. I don't trim it very much. If there's an area like right here where it's really thick, I'll go ahead and trim some of that off. I'll take it to less than a half an inch or about a quarter of an inch thick. I'll take some off the edge over here. So let's go ahead and get some of that, some of this really thick part of the fat cap over here off. So one little trick, I like to take some wet paper towels and put them down on the counter like this, and then put my cutting board on top of it like that. That'll help keep it from sliding around when I'm cutting. All right, so let's go ahead and trim off some of this. Some of this is really thick over here, so I'm going to take some of that off. When you're looking at a brisket, you'll see some of the fat is really hard. You want to take as much of that off as you possibly can. Here, this is pretty thick over here, so I'm going to go ahead and take some of this off. All right, on this side, where the fat cap is not, I look for silver skin, so there's a little bit of silver skin here. There's a little bit of fat here in this middle area on this one. I'll take this out. And then this piece of fat right here, this is really hard. Look at this. This is really hard fat. This is what I was talking about earlier. I'm going to go ahead and chop as much of that off as I possibly can. All right, now let's dig into some of this over here. All right, now let's see. It looks like there's a good little piece of fat on this side over here. See that right there? This is kind of hard right here, so let's take that off. When you look at the brisket, you'll notice that the grain of the muscle is going one direction. Like this. You'll see it traveling this way, okay? After you're done cutting, or after you're done cooking the brisket, you actually want to cut the brisket against the grain. So one thing I like to do is I like to take a piece, this end over here, and cut an end off like this. You end up losing a little bit of meat, but that's okay. All right. So what this does is now after the brisket is all cooked, I know to slice the brisket boop, 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 this way. That way it'll be against the grain. Now that we got the brisket all trimmed up, let's go ahead and season it. I like to actually use seasoning I like to use salt individually. I like to use pepper individually. And then I like to use one of my favorite rubs. Is McCormick's Montreal steak seasoning. This actually goes really well on a brisket. But go ahead and use whatever you want. I highly recommend do not use something with a really high sugar content in your brisket, because that will actually burn onto the outside of the brisket. And in theory, it sounds really good, but it really doesn't turn out so well. So I like to season the fat cap first because I don't really put a lot of seasoning on it. So I'm going to season it, flip it over, and then really get a lot of seasoning on the other side. So let's go ahead and start with the salt. Now I like to use coarse kosher salt. really the reason I like to use that is because I like the size of the granules, because when I'm sprinkling it on, I can see where they are. There's no, other than that, there's really not a specific reason. So then I like to get some pepper on here. You can see here, I went ahead and you can see the amount of seasoning I put on there. Now, there's really not an exact amount. There's not really a right and a wrong when it comes to it. It's really just comes to your taste. This seems to be a pretty good amount to me. It is really hard to over season a big piece of meat like this. It can take a lot of seasoning. So before I flip it over, I like to take and tamp it down like this. Because I don't usually use a binder. I find if you just take and push the seasoning into the meat like that, that works really well, and it tends to stick very well. So let me go wash my hands. We'll flip the meat. Actually, you know what? We'll flip the meat over now before I wash my hands. And now I'm gonna go wash my hands, and I'll be right back. All right, let's go ahead and repeat the process on this side. I'll start with the salt. Add some pepper. Now, I like to use this pepper that you have to grind like this. I find you get a lot more flavor when you grind your own pepper. It's a lot of work. But when you grind it right onto the brisket, I like the amount of flavor that you get out of it. There we go. McCormick's steak seasoning. There we go. Go ahead and get it on the edges. Tamp it down. Get the other edge. There we go. I missed a spot over here. Let's get that. I like to take and wrap this up and put it in the refrigerator and overnight, a good 6 to 8 hours, to really allow that salt to penetrate into the meat. That'll really give a lot of flavor. Okay, so let's get it. I'm gonna get it wrapped up, and I'm gonna see you at the smoker in the morning. Good morning. Here we are getting ready to put the brisket on the cooker. I got it sitting at 260 degrees right now. So let's go ahead and get it on the cooker. All right, let's get it opened up. As you can see, I already have some meat in here. These are some pork butts I'm doing for another video that I'm shooting at the same time. So, you see, this side is the fat cap here, okay? And this side is the top. The thick side is the point, and the thin side is the flat. I like to take the point and aim it towards the firebox. So I put it fat cap down, and then the point towards the firebox, okay? So it's gonna go on there just like that, and we'll let it come up to temperature. Once it goes into what's called the stall, then we'll wrap it, and I'll finish it off from there. Yeah, I just want to show you the temperatures here. This temperature up in the upper left-hand corner is the temperature of the cooking chamber, and these two temperatures here are the probes in the brisket, and this temperature right here is a probe in the pork butts that I have in there. I want to draw your attention to these here. Notice the one is 130 and one is 152 degrees, okay? That is because this probe is in the point, which is the much thicker part of the brisket, and this probe is in the flat, which is the much thinner part of the brisket. All right, and as you're cooking along, the brisket will go into what's called the stall, okay? And how you know it's in the stall is you'll see this temperature and this temperature. You'll see this one catch up with this one, okay? So what happens is as the brisket is cooking and the fat starts to render, it'll hold a temperature-ish right around 160 160 to 170 degrees for quite a while before it actually goes up the rest of the way. So when I see this number and this number start to catch up with this number, I know that the brisket is going into the stall, and that's when I'm really going to start paying attention and deciding when I'm going to wrap it. I don't really have a specific temperature that I decide to wrap. It's really what the brisket looks like. It's approximately between 165 and 175 degrees. Somewhere in there will be a good time to wrap. So I'll take you over to the cooking chamber and we'll take a look at the brisket itself. All right, as you can see here, you see the brisket is starting to turn a nice color, and it's starting to dry out a little bit so on the surface. So I just take a squirt bottle with about 1 part apple cider vinegar to 3 parts water, and I just squirt it onto the surface like this. And I do that about once I see it start to dry out. I'll do that about once an hour just to keep the surface nice and moist. And I'm going to go ahead and do it on these pork butts while we're right here. All right, let's get this closed back down. All right, you see here where the point of the brisket is 152 and the flat of the brisket is 162. So the point is starting to catch up with the flat. That tells me that the brisket is starting to go into the stall. So you can see the brisket is now in a full stall. The point has caught up with the flat. They're only 1 degree apart from each other. So let's head over and take a look at this. Gonna open this up. Yeah. Wow. Look at that bark starting to develop on there. I've been spraying it about once every hour or so. All right, as you can see there, the bark is really starting to develop on the outside of that. I'm not quite ready to wrap it yet, because I wanted to build up a little bit more. And once the brisket starts to, I believe once it starts coming out of the stall is when we'll wrap it. I think that's where we're gonna do this one. I want you to notice here the temperature of the brisket. The point has now passed the temperature of the flat, and that tells me that the brisket is getting ready to come out of the stall. So let's go ahead and check it and see if it's ready to wrap. As you can see, that bark is starting to form real nicely on there. Look at those burn ends. That is delicious. I would say that is ready to go ahead and wrap. For the wrapping process, I like to use the extra wide butcher paper. This is 24-inch butcher paper, and then I like to put on some glove liners and some nitrile gloves. These glove liners really help protect your hands from the heat, and this allows you to pick it up without burning your hands. First thing I like to do is go ahead and get a piece of butcher paper about the length of my table, cut off. So I'll roll this out. There we go. Just set this on there so that it doesn't blow away. And then I'm going to go over here and get the brisket. Go ahead and put it on the butcher paper, fat cap down, just like that. All right. And then I can take this away. And then fold it up like that. And then over and over. And then just wrap it up like this. All right, just like that. Now we go ahead and put it back on the smoker. I went ahead and put it back in, right back where it was. I turned it around so now the point is facing the other direction. That's not completely necessary, but I like to do it. And then just put your temperature probe back into your meat. Just like that. And get your other probe. Put that one in. There we go. All right. Now close her back up.
I want to apologize. I thought that I recorded this part properly, but I did not. So I'm going to do a voiceover this clip right here. The brisket was 200 degrees in the flat and 206 in the point, and I checked for tenderness. And when I inserted the probe, the meat thermometer probe into the brisket, it felt about like peanut butter. And so I decided at this point I was going to take it off, and then I brought it inside. So let's go take a look at it.
Here we go. It's time for the big reveal of this brisket. Let's go ahead and get it unwrapped and see how it looks. Oh, it smells amazing. There. Wow. All right. Here we go. I'm going to pull it out, set it on. There. Wow. Would you look at that? Look at that nice bark on there. That looks delicious. Nice and juicy. Let's go ahead and slice this up. If you remember in the beginning of the video when I told you about which the grain goes one way, and I did the little slice on the brisket, which was this slice right here. This tells me that the grain is going this way, and I'm going to follow this cut. So when you slice the brisket on the side of the flat over here, you want to slice approximately a 1/4 inch slice. Actually, let me turn this so that you can see it. There we go. Oh yeah. So the test for a brisket, if you've cooked it properly, 1/4 inch thick, all right, about like that, about the thickness of a pencil, should be able to be, I'll hold it like this and it won't fall apart. And then just like that, when you go to pull on it, it just stretches a little bit like that and then just pulls apart easily. All right, let me show you one more. All right, 1/4 inch thick, holds together like that, stretches just a little bit and then pulls right apart just like that. Now you know that that is a properly cooked brisket. As you slice, going this way, once you make it to right about here to where the point of the brisket is, there's a second muscle, so you're actually in the grain of the brisket turns 90 degrees. So when you get about here, all right, I'm gonna actually slice it right there. Okay, right at the point, and then show you. See that right there where there's two muscles? There's a muscle here and a muscle here, and then you squeeze that. Look at that. Look at all that juice come out of there. And now what you're going to do is you're actually going to turn and slice the brisket the opposite direction over here. And on the point of the brisket, you're going to slice it about the thickness of a fat pencil. So this side is going to be a little bit fatter slices than this side. So let's go ahead and slice a couple pieces off here. cut that right in the middle. So you saw how I turned the brisket. Just like that. So you see how that side of the brisket is just a little bit, you cut a little bit thicker. That's because this side tends to be a little bit fatter and tends to fall apart a little bit easier, so you cut a little bit thicker pieces. And other than that, it's just enjoy. So I'll see you next time.